In the heart of San Francisco, there is a 58-story tower of glass and money. When it opened, it was the tallest residential building in the city. A penthouse here cost more than $10 million. Tech founders lived in it. A former NFL quarterback lived in it. It was supposed to be the safest, smartest, most luxurious address in town. Today, that tower has sunk more than 18 inches into the ground. It leans nearly 30 inches off vertical at the top. You can stand in the lobby, set a marble on the floor, and watch it roll. And for years, the most expensive question in California was a simple one. Was it going to stop? This is not a story about one unlucky building. Around the world, some of the heaviest objects humans have ever made are quietly losing a slow-motion fight with the one thing nobody can see, the ground underneath them. A tower in Texas they had to blow up before anyone moved in. A building in China that fell flat on its side in one piece, with the foundation snapped off like broken pencils. The most famous clock tower on Earth, tilting a little more every year. And one skyscraper in Mexico City that sits on the worst soil of all of them and refuses to sink. To understand how a brand new skyscraper can start sinking the day it opens, we have to go back to the moment this one was supposed to be the future. Act 1. The tower that started sinking. In the early 2000s, San Francisco was running out of room and running into money. The neighborhood called South of Market was the new frontier, flat, central, walking distance to downtown. So, a developer called Mission Street Development planned something the city had never really seen. A slender, 58-story concrete tower full of luxury condominiums. They called it the Millennium Tower. It was a serious building. Reinforced concrete, not steel, heavier than a steel tower of the same height, but stiffer, quieter, and exactly what wealthy buyers wanted. By 2009 it was finished, and it sold fast. For a few years, it was simply the best address in the city. There was just one problem, and at first, almost nobody noticed it. The building was sinking. Now, every building settles a little. Engineers expect it. When the Millennium Tower was designed, the geotechnical engineers ran the numbers and predicted that over its entire lifetime, decades, it would settle somewhere between 4 and 6 inches. That is normal. That is fine. By 2014, only 5 years after it opened, the tower had already sunk about 14 inches. It had blown through its 100-year settlement budget in half a decade, and it was not going down evenly. One side was sinking faster than the other, which meant the whole tower was beginning to tilt, leaning slowly toward the northwest, toward its neighbors, toward the street. When the news finally broke in 2016, it became a sensation. Reporters rolled balls across kitchen floors and filmed them speeding up. Residents discovered cracks in their walls and basement. Lawyers arrived. Lawsuits piled up by the dozen. The value of those $10 million condos started to fall as fast as the building itself. And the question everyone wanted answered was the obvious one. This was a brand new tower, built by professionals, approved by the city, in a country with some of the strictest building codes on Earth. So how does a skyscraper like that start sinking the moment people move in? The answer is not in the tower at all. It is buried 60 to 90 feet below it, in a layer of ancient mud with a deceptively gentle name. Act 2. The fight with the mud. Here is the thing about a skyscraper. We think of it as a thing that stands on the ground. It does not. It floats on the ground in the same way a heavy person sinks into a soft mattress. The only question that matters is what the mattress is made of. Under most great cities, deep down, there is rock, solid, competent bedrock that can carry almost any load you put on it. The classic way to found a skyscraper is to drive long columns called piles straight down until they hit that rock, and let the rock do the work. These are called end-bearing piles. The building, in effect, stands on stone. But south of Market has a problem. It was not always land. Much of it used to be the edge of San Francisco Bay, filled in over a century ago. And under the Millennium Tower, the good bedrock is not 30 feet down or 60. To reach solid rock there, you would have to drive piles more than 200 feet into the earth. That is expensive, that is slow. So the engineers chose a different solution. Instead of reaching all the way to rock, they supported the tower on roughly 940 concrete piles, driven only about 60 to 90 feet down, into a thick layer of dense sand. These are called friction piles. They do not stand on anything solid. They grip the soil along their sides, and they hold the building up by friction, the way you can hold a pencil in mid-air just by squeezing it. On paper, this works. The math checks out. Friction piles hold up buildings all over the world. But there was a catch, and the catch was sitting just underneath the bottom of those piles. A layer of soft, waterlogged marine clay called the Old Bay clay. Clay like this behaves in a way that feels almost alive. Imagine a sponge, soaked with water, sitting under a heavy book. At first, it holds the weight, but slowly, over months and years, the water squeezes out, the sponge flattens, and the book sinks lower. Engineers call this consolidation. The weight of the tower pressed down through the sand into that clay, and the clay began, slowly, silently, unstoppably, to squeeze itself flat. And it got worse because of the neighbors. As nearby construction pumped water out of the ground to dig their own foundations, the water table dropped, the clay dried and shrank further, and the Millennium Tower sank faster. The tower was not failing because someone made an obvious mistake. It was failing because of a slow, invisible process in a layer of mud that almost no resident had ever heard of. That is the cruel signature of these disasters. The building looks perfect. The glass is flawless. The fault is in the ground, and the ground keeps its secrets for years. But if you want to see what happens when settlement is allowed to win completely, you have to leave San Francisco and go to a beach in Texas. Act 3. The tower they had to blow up. On South Padre Island, Texas, a developer set out to build the tallest building on the island, a 31-story luxury condominium tower right by the water, called Ocean Tower. It was going to be a landmark. Buyers put down deposits before a single window was installed. In 2008, with the structure largely up but not yet finished, workers noticed something that stops every engineer's heart. Cracks. Not hairline cracks in plaster, cracks in the concrete columns that were holding the building up. Construction was halted. Investigators came in, and what they found was almost a copy of the San Francisco story, but worse. The core of the tower had already sunk more than 14 inches before anyone had even moved in, and it had sunk unevenly. The reason was painfully familiar. Deep below the site, between roughly 120 and 190 feet down, there was a layer of expandable, compressible clay. The foundation piles reached only about 95 feet. They stopped short. They never bypassed the bad layer, and so the whole building tipped and settled into the clay like a fence post pushed into wet earth. The developers first promised to fix it, but the engineers ran the studies, and the verdict was brutal. The settlement was too severe, the tower was too compromised, and any repair would cost more than the building was worth. there was only one option left. They were going to have to destroy a brand new skyscraper that had never housed a single resident. On the 13th of December 2009, the demolition firm Controlled Demolition Incorporated brought it down with explosives. At 55,000 tons, Ocean Tower became the tallest reinforced concrete building ever taken down by a controlled implosion. A finished tower gone in seconds because of a clay layer nobody had drilled deep enough to escape. Ocean Tower at least had a warning. The cracks showed up, the work stopped, and people made a careful decision to bring it down on their own terms. But a building does not always wait for the wrecking crew. Sometimes the ground simply lets go all at once, and the whole tower lies down. Act 4. The building that fell over in one piece. Early in the morning, on the 27th of June 2009, in the Minhang district of Shanghai, a 13-story apartment building did something buildings are not supposed to be able to do. It fell over. Not crumbled, not pancaked floor onto floor. It tipped, rotated, and came to rest on its side, almost completely intact. Windows still in their frames, walls still standing, the whole tower lying flat on the ground like a toppled bookshelf. It was one of 11 nearly identical towers in a complex called Lotus Riverside, and it had not yet been handed over to its buyers. A single worker inside was killed. The photographs went around the world because they showed something the public almost never sees. The bottom of a skyscraper, ripped out of the ground and pointing sideways at the sky. And there, exposed for everyone to look at, were the foundation piles, hollow concrete tubes, snapped clean off like a row of broken pencils. That image is the whole story of this video in a single picture. The building was fine. The piles failed. What happened was a textbook collision of two construction decisions on opposite sides of the same building. On one side, workers were digging a deep pit for an underground garage. The soil they dug out had to go somewhere, so it was piled into a huge mound on the other side of the tower, at one point as high as 10 meters, the height of a 3-story building. So now you have a hole on one side, lowering the support, and an enormous weight of earth on the other side, pushing down and sideways. The ground between them was soft and wet. Investigators concluded that this lopsided pressure shoved the soil sideways underneath the building, and the foundation piles, designed to carry weight straight down, not to resist a giant horizontal push, simply snapped. The tower rotated on its broken base and lay down. It is the fastest version of the same disease. Millennium Tower took 15 years to lean 30 inches. Lotus Riverside Block 7 leaned 90 degrees in a matter of minutes. The mechanism was the same villain every time: soft ground and a foundation that could not cope with what was happening to it. You might think a failure this dramatic could only happen to a building going up in a hurry. But the same slow process is at work under one of the most famous towers on Earth, and tourists pose in front of it every single day. Act 5. The Leaning Tower of London. Stand on Westminster Bridge in London, look at the clock tower that everyone calls Big Ben, and it looks perfectly, reassuringly vertical. It is not. The Elizabeth Tower, to use its proper name, is leaning. It tilts to the northwest by about 0.26 degrees. That sounds like nothing, and at the top of the tower it adds up to a lean of roughly 20 inches, about half a meter off from true vertical. The cause should sound familiar by now. Big Ben sits on a bed of gravel over a thick layer of soft London clay. Clay again. As that clay slowly dries and shifts, the tower tips very gently in the direction it finds easiest to move. And just like in San Francisco, the neighbors made it worse. Decades of tunneling under the city, most notably the extension of the Jubilee Underground Line in the 1990s, disturbed the ground around the tower and sped up the lean. Since 2003, the tilt has been growing at close to 1 millimeter a year, faster than its long-term average. Now, before anyone panics, the tower is not about to fall into the Thames. Engineers watch it constantly, and at its current rate, it would take thousands of years to lean as far as the Tower of Pisa. But that is exactly what makes Big Ben such a good teacher. This is not a corner-cutting developer or a rushed construction site. This is a beloved national monument built by careful Victorian engineers on the soft clay of one of the richest cities in the world, and it is still slowly losing the same argument with the ground. The clay does not care how famous you are, which raises the question that haunts every one of these stories. Once a tower has started to lean, is there anything you can actually do about it? Can you untilt a building? The answer was worked out, of all places, on a tower that has been falling over since the Middle Ages. Act 6. 800 Years of Falling. In the Italian city of Pisa, construction began in the year 1173 on a bell tower for the cathedral. The builders got about 3 stories up, and the tower began to lean. The ground beneath it was exactly the kind of villain we have been describing: weak, soft layers of clay, silt and sand, with the water table sitting barely a meter or 2 below the surface. The medieval builders did something accidental and brilliant. Construction stopped for almost a century, partly because of war. That long pause let the soft soil settle and strengthen under the weight already there. If they had built straight through, the tower would almost certainly have fallen over. When they finally continued, they even tried to correct the lean by building the upper floors slightly taller on the low side, which is why, if you look closely, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is actually very slightly banana-shaped. For 800 years it leaned, and slowly the lean got worse. By the late 20th century, the tower was tilting more than 5 degrees and genuinely at risk of collapse. It was closed to the public. And the engineers faced a problem that sounds impossible. How do you straighten a priceless 800-year-old tower without knocking it down in the process? Their solution was the opposite of brute force, and it is beautiful. They did not push the tower upright. Instead, they drilled a series of thin, angled holes deep under the high side of the tower, the side that was leaning up, away from the ground. Then, very carefully, they removed tiny amounts of soil from under that high side. With less soil to stand on, the high side gently settled downward, and the whole tower rotated back toward vertical, a few buckets of dirt at a time. It worked. Over about 2.5 years, they reduced the lean by around half a degree, not enough to make it look straight, because the world wants it to lean, but enough to make it safe. In June of 2001, the tower was handed back, stabilized for at least another 200 years. They had given the technique a name: under excavation, and Pisa was only the rehearsal. The same trick was about to be used to save something far larger in a city that is sinking all at once. Act 7. The Sinking Cathedral. Mexico City is built on the bed of a drained lake, and the entire city is sinking. For more than a century, the city has pumped its drinking water out of the soft clay beneath it, and as that water leaves, the clay compresses and the ground drops, in places, by several feet over the decades. Whole streets tilt. Colonial buildings lean against each other. And in the very center of the city sits one of the most important buildings in the Americas, the Metropolitan Cathedral, begun in the 1500s, an enormous stone structure that had been sinking unevenly for centuries. That uneven part is what made it dangerous. Different parts of the cathedral rested on slightly different ground, so they sank at different rates. One section would drop while another held, twisting the stone, cracking the arches, and slowly pulling the whole structure out of shape. By the late 20th century, the differential settlement was so severe that the building was considered at serious risk. So between roughly 1993 and 1998, engineers performed one of the most delicate operations in the history of construction, and they did it with the exact technique perfected at Pisa. They sank shafts deep beneath the cathedral and drove narrow steel tubes about 10 centimeters across into the soft clay below the parts of the building that had sunk the least. Then they extracted soil, a little at a time, letting those high sections settle down to meet the low ones. They deliberately sank the cathedral by nearly a meter in places, not to lower it, but to even it out, to bring the whole twisted structure gently back into balance. They used the sinking city's own worst enemy, soft clay, as the tool to save the building. Pisa and the cathedral show the hopeful side of this story. With enough understanding and enough patience, you really can fix a building that the ground is trying to swallow. Which brings us all the way back to San Francisco and to the Millennium Tower, where engineers bet everything on the opposite approach, not removing soil but adding piles, and where the first attempt went horribly wrong. Act 8. The fix that made it worse. By the late 2010s, the Millennium Tower could not be ignored any longer. It had sunk more than 18 inches and was leaning more and more each year. Doing nothing was not an option. So an engineering firm called Simpson Gumpertz and Heger designed an ambitious rescue. The idea was elegant on paper. The original tower floated on friction piles in soft soil, so they would give it what it never had, a connection to bedrock. The plan was to drill a row of new piles, thick concrete columns around 2 feet across, down through everything, more than 250 feet, all the way to the solid rock the original builders had skipped. These new piles, around the sinking edges of the building, would catch the tower and hold it like a hand sliding under a falling plate. Construction began, and then the tower did something nobody wanted. It sank faster. The very act of drilling those deep holes next to the foundation disturbed the soil and the water around the building. And in the short term, the tower settled even more. In the summer of 2021, with the fix actively making things worse, the engineers did the only responsible thing. They stopped. They halted their own rescue project to figure out why the patient was getting sicker from the medicine. This is the part of the story that almost never gets told, and it is the most honest part. Real engineering is not a clean line from problem to solution. It is a fight with setbacks, where the experts sometimes make the very thing they are trying to save worse before they make it better. After a pause, they redesigned. Instead of the full row of piles, they installed a smaller, smarter set. Around 18 piles concentrated on the north and the west sides, the sides that were sinking fastest. And this time, slowly, the monitoring data started to say something the residents had not heard in 15 years. The sinking had stopped. The settlement was, in the language of the engineers, arrested. And then something almost no one expected. The tower, very slowly, began to lean back. As the new bedrock piles took the load on the low side, the building started to recover some of the tilt it had lost, a process that will play out over many years, fractions of an inch at a time. The marble on the lobby floor will roll a little slower every year. After 15 years of sinking, the Millennium Tower had finally found the ground. So when the soil is this treacherous, is the answer just to spend more, drill deeper, fight harder? Not exactly, because the single most impressive building in this entire story sits on the worst ground of all, and it barely moves. Act 9, The Tower That Floats. We are back in Mexico City, on that same drained lakebed, that same soft volcanic clay that is, in places, more water than soil, the ground that is slowly eating the Metropolitan Cathedral. Now imagine trying to build a 44-story skyscraper there, in the 1950s, in one of the most earthquake-prone regions in the world. It sounds like every disaster in this video combined into one. And yet the Torre Latinoamericana, finished in 1956, is one of the great quiet triumphs of engineering. Its designers understood the ground completely. They drove 361 deep piles down to a firmer layer of sand and combined them with a thick, rigid foundation slab so that the entire tower behaves less like a building planted in the mud and more like a boat floating on it, distributing its weight so evenly that the soft ground can carry it. The real test came on the 19th of September 1985, when a magnitude 8.1 earthquake struck Mexico City and killed thousands. Across the city, modern buildings collapsed into rubble. The Torre Latinoamericana stood through it with no significant structural damage. It had already survived a major quake in 1957, and it would survive another in 2017. On the worst soil, in the worst conditions, the building that respected the ground simply refused to fall. That is the difference. The Millennium Tower, Ocean Tower, and the building in Shanghai were not doomed by their location. Plenty of great towers stand on terrible ground. They were caught out by a gap between what the soil was really doing and what their foundations assumed it would do. Torre Latinoamericana closed that gap. The others left it open, and the clay found it. So the next time you stand at the base of a skyscraper and look up, remember that the most important part of it is the part you cannot see. Every tall building is a bet that the ground will hold still for 100 years. Most of the time, the bet pays off, and we never think about it. But somewhere underneath the glass and the marble and the $10 million views, there is a layer of soil, slowly making up its mind. The engineers who lose these bets are rarely reckless. They are usually just a little too optimistic about the mud. And right now, in some city that is growing too fast and running out of room, another developer is looking at another patch of soft ground, running the numbers and asking the same quiet question that started all of this. How little can we get away with?